Good afternoon, everybody. We're just at 3 p.m. Welcome to Cabinet on Tuesday, 27th of July 2021. We are here in the Town Hall, socially distanced, and welcome to Cabinet members, and also two of the members. Welcome. I'm assuming that you'll want to ask a question. And we've got a couple who are joined us, well, three actually, who have joined us virtually, so we'll bring them in as needed. So without further ado, membership of the Cabinet, we are all here. Any apologies? Anybody know where Will is? You know? But let's hope that he's on his way. Item 2, declaration of interest. Anybody got any interest with?
Yes, on item 15, Chair, it's not a pecuniary interest, it's another, and I have handed a form in already. I won't be taking part in that one.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. If anybody else has got any declaration of interest, please complete the form and hand it in to Andrea after the meeting. And if you're watching virtually, please email it to her. Item 3, admission of the public. We've got 2 members of the public. My understanding that you are here to observe. Should you want to speak on the items, just let me know. I've been advised that you just want to observe. Welcome, Will. We were in anticipation that you will be here. Hope you're well. No problem. We just started, mate. No worries. So we've got a full house. Item 4, any deputations or petitions? We've not received any. Item 5, questions by members of the public. You don't have any questions, so I will continue. Item 6, questions by elected members, oral questions. First person that I get in my eyesight is Councillor Martin Bolt, and then John afterwards. So Martin, your question.
Yeah, you've been threatening to mute me for years now, you have done. Thanks, Shabir. On the 29th of April, the leaders of councils across the country were written to by the Minister of State, Luke Hall, reflecting on the High Court decision by Mr. Justice Chamberlain, which removed the ability of councils to have decision-making meetings remotely. Could you tell me why Kirklees is still having decision-making meetings remotely?
There was a judicial review and all the councils through the LGA clubbed together and asked the government to reconsider getting meetings in person as we are doing now. The government did back us to say that they will support us, but unfortunately the way things went, we didn't get anywhere. So as a result, the advice that we have received from the LGA and from our own legal people is that we have to comply to the law. But having said that, I know that they are trying to ensure that wherever possible we do have virtual meetings where no decisions are made, and I think there are some committees where we are doing that. Because Cabinet is a decision-making body, unfortunately we have to, or fortunately, it depends how you see, but I do know that there's still a lot of unrest in terms of how we move forward. Just last week, we actually had an LGA meeting, the Executive Advisory Board, which I'm part of, and this exact issue came up. And Councillor James Jamieson, who's a fantastic leader of the LGA, he said that we still need to actually pursue with the government in terms of how we make it safer, because it's a farce, isn't it? Because Parliament can do what they want and have virtual meetings and everything's okay for Parliament, but when it comes to councils, we're forced to meet in person. Now, I don't have a problem with the law, but the law has got to be applied equally and fairly to everybody. Just because we're councillors and councils, that doesn't mean to say we are second-class citizens. But we are in pursuit through the LGA on a cross-party basis to make sure that there's one law and one law for everybody. Thanks, Councillor Bolt.
Yeah, thanks. And I agree with what you say, that it does seem to be strange, to say the least, that the law and the High Court judgment applies to councils, but yet Parliament is meeting in a hybrid fashion. So it does appear strange, but as I'm sure you're aware, Mr. Justice Chamberlain, in handing down his judgment, said, in our view, once the flexibility regulations cease to apply, which was the 7th of May, such meetings must take place at a single specified geographical location, and attending a meeting at such locations means physically going to it, and being present at such meeting involves physical presence. I'm aware that we've had licensing panels that have been making decisions remotely, and there are other committees which make a decision. Members are asked to vote or agree on something. Now, I'm sure, as you say, the law should apply equally, but until such times as that element is changed, could you instruct staff to make sure that Kirklees complies with the law, and any committee, panel or other which actually makes a decision must comply with the law and meet in person? Thank you.
I'm sure that we and other councils do comply with the law because we have to, and also there's a moral case as well, isn't there? Because law is one thing to be applied fairly, but there's also a moral case because I do know a lot of councillors across all parties, not just this council but other councils, feel quite vulnerable, and we also need to understand that as well. But what I will do is I'll ask our officers to keep in mind what you said, because as far as I'm concerned, every single meeting has complied to the law, and the only meetings where that is not taking place is where they don't need to make a decision. But thanks for your question, Martin. We've got the next question from Councillor Smage. Councillor Smage is joining us virtually, so Councillor Smage, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. We have a lot of concerns about speed of traffic through Birstall and Berkshire, and we have previously purchased 2 speed indicator devices which are rotated around the ward. However, Highways withdrew these devices last September, October to have them updated, but they've not yet been returned. Can the relevant Cabinet member please update us as to why the speed indicator devices are not being updated and put back into position, and what is happening in respect of the SID programme? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Councillor Naheed, do you want to answer that, please? Naheed, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage, and yes, you are right, and yes, we are beginning to invest and look at the latest technology, and I will be able to get in touch with you later on once I've found out precisely where we are in relation to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Naheed, Mother. Councillor Smage, is that all right?
Yes, if there could be some time frame for getting back to me, please, as this has been ongoing since last year.
Yes. Naheed, any?
And I will get in touch with you as soon as I can, so I'm not talking about months, possibly next week. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Next question is to Councillor John Lawson. John, are you there? Yes, you're there. I can see you. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. I was really just wanting a very quick update, no supplementary question, on the progress of the report to Corporate Governance and Audit that was requested at the AGM to do with committee system models from surrounding areas, and what progress have been made by officers, and are we on time scale to have some kind of report that we could cast our eye over in September or October this year. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I think my understanding is that we agreed this at full council last May, and I might be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, we are still on trajectory to bring something back in, was it September? Yes. Is that okay, John?
It would be good to have thank you. It would be good to have that confirmed. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure that I'll check it, but as far as I am aware, there will be a report that will come to full council in September. Okay.
Thank you.
Next question from Councillor Munro. Alison, your question, please.
Hello, thank you, Shabir. Please can you tell me what options are being considered for the former Almonbury Community School site, as King James's School will be vacating the premises in December 2021, bearing in mind the council continues to discharge the PFI for the site at a rate of, I understand, to be in the region of £650,000 a month.
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Carol Patterson to provide you with an answer. Carol, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Munro. We did receive your question over the weekend on this matter. The school, the old Almonbury Community School, is currently being used by King James's and will be until the building works on their site is finished. When that is complete and they remove all their students from that to their new building, the council will be making use of it, but I'm afraid at the moment I can't give you, because I don't know, any of the options that are being thought about, but you can rest assured that these will be shared with you as soon as they can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask a supplementary, please?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carol, for that response. However, I'm a bit concerned here because vast amounts of money are involved in this, and surely it is right for us to expect the council to have a concrete plan at this stage. So why are we not being given the details?
Carol?
Because there is no concrete plan. It's not an easy solution because I mean I really do not want to set any hairs running whatsoever. So I won't even start to suggest the range of options that could be thought of. But it will be as cost effective and we will make good use of the buildings, all the land, and it won't be housing, I can give you that much. It will remain as education use. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Patterson. Councillor David Hall. Dave, over to you. Your question, please.
Thank you, Leader. My question is to Councillor McBride, and it's about planning. Talking to residents over the past month or so, and it seems quite clear that we've got some major problems with planning decisions being behind schedule, which are causing a few problems. And I was wondering whether Councillor McBride could tell us how the service intends to try and catch up with some of these applications that are behind schedule, please.
Councillor McBride.
Yeah, if you'll send me the details, I'll try and deal with them, David. But you just give me a scanty bit of information so far. If you send me details, I will ensure that the officers deal with it.
Is that okay, Dave? I don't know if you heard, but if you can send Councillor McBride full details, he's said that he will look into it fully. Is that okay? Or you got a
Thank you. I do appreciate that. Thank you, Peter. There's one thing else that I'd like to say about it, and that is that it not only are we seeing quite a lot of applications behind schedule, but it's increasingly difficult to get hold of planning officers to get information from them or to have a chat with them about planning applications. And of course, this is at a time, this is a service which the residents are paying for over and above what they pay in the council tax for the planning applications. We really do have a responsibility to try and deliver these summertime. I've never known it being to be so behind. So maybe Councillor McBride could take this as an indication that I think things are behind, but I will certainly send one or two things through to him to see if he can get things moving. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. I think Peter's...
I take your point, but in a sense, we're the victims of our own success. We're the only authority with a local plan, and we're getting loads of applications. We have a limited number of officers dealing with this. We are trying to recruit, but at the moment, planners are in big demand, and we're trying to cope with the scale of operation. Nonetheless, obviously, we want to get on top of this. So any problems you have with regard to this, David, just let me know and I will bring those to the attention of the relevant officers.
Thank you, Councillor McBride and Councillor David Hall for asking that question. We've got Councillor John Taylor who's here. John, your question.
Thank you, Chair. It's to Councillor Mather. Is she aware of the problems with brown bins?
Yes, John, I am aware of it. Do you want me to say, do you want to ask a supplemental, or do you want me to say what I'm aware of?
I'll repeat what the Mayor said. I was
Sorry,
asking for the
Leader.
supplementary.
Sorry, Leader.
We'll just have a debate over questions. My concern is everybody's aware of the problem with the brown bin renewal service, but we're still hearing of instances, and I dealt with one only yesterday, where bins are being removed, although people haven't had the opportunity yet to pay their renewal because they haven't been contacted by the council. They've no way of knowing. So I'm asking what you, as the Cabinet member responsible, are doing, because I think it's outrageous that if you're aware of the problem, I'm still having residents that are having their bins taken away, because it suggests you haven't done anything constructive about it. Thank you.
And can I apologise? I said I was aware of the problem. I wasn't aware of that particular problem, but I was aware that there have been issues, other issues. So I will ask the officers and get back in touch with you, John. And yes, you are right. We need to ensure that we get our house in order, and we will do that as soon as we can. And those that have had their bins confiscated will get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. And John, yeah, I'll bring you back in. I've got Councillor Martin Bolt first. Martin.
Thank you, yeah. The A62-A644 major highway scheme has been promoted on roadside boards to people as have your say on Cooper Bridge. To the residents I've met from Leeds Road, Oak Road, Bradley Road, Brooklands and the immediate areas around there, this didn't convey to them the impact this huge scheme will have on their houses and their standard of living. Please will Cabinet provide officer support to help these residents now fully understand the impact of this major highway scheme on them and their surroundings?
I'll answer that. It's quite a general question. It is a big major capital investment, Councillor Bolt, and we will do everything we can to make sure that we carry the support and actually take account of any upheaval, any change, any issues that come up as far as we can with local residents. You got a supplementary?
Yeah, it didn't actually answer. The situation, to expand on it, when the sign says, have your say on Cooper Bridge, and the people in the Brooklands area, Oak Road, are probably a mile away, to them it didn't immediately signify. It was only when it was in the media and other places that myself and ward members were called to meet people, and they said, yeah, we haven't been consulted. Some people hadn't had letters. There's listed buildings there that are going to be majorly affected. People could lose the ability to park outside their homes. So again, could you instruct officers to attend meetings with the appropriate plans so the residents, because they're very difficult sometimes, I mean, if people are working off a telephone, you can't see the plans clearly. We're working with people here who are going to have a major road put through the front of their house on Oak Road as the Bradley Road is diverted. And what I'm asking for is, can officers go and support those people to fully understand the implications, and then they are able to put a reasoned response in?
Councillor Peter McBride, you're probably a bit more closer to this than I am. Do you want to just provide some more assurances,
already
please?
There has been discussion with people in that area. There will be a lot more because we recognise these are people who will be most affected. There will be a major involvement of them in the whole process of realignments and rearrangements in that area. Point taken, Martin, yes, it is important. Of course, it's not your ward, is it? So really you're outside your normal domain, but there we are. So nonetheless, it will be treated properly and it will be addressed fully.
Thank you, Councillor McBride, for that response, and I hope that gives you some assurances, Councillor Martin Bolt. got Councillor David Hall. David, you want to supplement another question? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. This question is to Councillor Davies for the corporate portfolio. I'm just at the moment dealing with a case in the ward of a small builder who has been sent a summons for non-payments of council tax for unfinished properties. Now I understand this is the policy that the council takes a judgment as to when these habitations should be finished, and then they apply council tax even though there's nobody living in them. And we're trying to sort it out at the moment to try and come to an agreement so that this man doesn't have to go to court. And my question is really, would he take a look, please, at the policy that we're applying at the moment? And in the light of COVID and the fact that builders are having to wait for supplies, they're having to wait for builders sometimes because their employees are often isolating. And given that, particularly in the case of these elderly persons accommodation, prospective buyers haven't been willing really to journey out much in the past year. I wonder whether they could take a look at the policy again, please, and make sure that it is being that people who are courtmate are being treated leniently, at least until we're out of the woods as far as COVID's concerned.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Paul Davies. Paul,
yeah,
over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Certainly, I know that what we've done during the whole pandemic is try our very best to ensure that we're not putting extra burdens on our citizens through council tax payments. And yes, we are now starting to look at how we can reapply that and also, look for arrears. But you raise a fair point in terms of, doing that in as sensible, measured and lenient manner as possible. So I'm very happy to look at, first of all, this individual case, if you can send me the details, and also certainly would have no problem in having further discussions around how we're applying the policy at the moment. But certainly, right at the core of what we're doing is very much in line, I think, with the sentiments you've expressed. So please send me the details, and I will, as I say, I will look at how we're applying it at the moment as well.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Hall, you got a supplementary?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor John Taylor, you've got another question.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably one for you, really. So we've already heard Councillor Hall talk about concerns with planning and capacity. I've also picked up issues around capacity within highways, capacity within various enforcement areas, and I'm just wondering, I'm giving it to you, Leader, because I'm not really sure who should be picking this up, but I'm just wondering what is being done to address some of the vacancies and the shortfalls in skill sets that we've got across the council. You talk a lot about the ambitious plans for the council, but the ambitious plans will come to naught if there aren't the people behind them to actually do the work.
Thanks, John, and I think that's a really, really good question. It just doesn't relate to the council, and again, this is something that we've discussed at West Yorkshire level and also last week at the LGA Exec Board, because what we're seeing is, although the economy is actually opening up, and I think the right decision to make in terms of 19th of July, the opening of the economy, and as we move forward into August, the problem is is a number of different things are happening. One is people still don't feel, individuals, confident to come out and mix. So we're doing as much as we can. You also will recall at the last meeting, Councillor Lawson asked me a question regarding how are we making sure that our staff are safeguarded, and I gave an undertaking that we will do not just what the law says, but we will do the right thing in terms of what our duty of care is towards our staff, and at the same time, duty of care towards our residents, because you'd be amazed, I'm sure you've had it in your email inboxes as well, as local councillors, that people still don't feel comfortable in terms of making that norm, that leap, in terms of mixing and coming together. But then the bigger issue here, isn't there? It's about the workforce and how the workforce is actually wanting to get back to normal, but because this app that you have on your phone, which actually pings you, and there's issues that are happening there because I don't know what the data is, but I can just go on anecdotal evidence based on what I've discussed with other colleagues from another country and what I've discussed with the private leaders, private business leaders, that the government needs to actually get a policy, a guidance note in terms of how exactly that pinging will work. So say, for example, I'm here today and suddenly I'm tested positive, then as far as I'm concerned, you are all sitting here and have not been within 2 meters of your distance since I came in here. But if you suddenly are all asked to isolate and stay at home for 10 days, is that fair? Now, you could argue that we are all able to work from home and all the rest of it, but in terms of a lot of our staff, if they want to actually come back to some kind of normality, they have to make them personal contacts, and at the same time, they've got to then go through a regime in terms of what they need to do in terms of isolation and all the rest of it, and they've then got to actually sort out their families. And you see the issue here, it's actually a snowball effect. It's actually an exponential impact on people. And that's where this morning there was a ministerial webinar, and we've actually once again asked government for some very clear guidance, because until we get a very clear policy in terms of how we can actually move forward in terms of coming into contact with other people, we're always going to be second guessing. So there are issues here. You asked me, what do we do? Well, I believe we're still in the middle of a pandemic. And besides doing everything we can to actually follow the health and advice that's coming out from Public Health England and the Director of Public Health, pray. Because as a councillor, I actually go and have some minds and feelings. And we have to make sure that we do our bit in terms of making sure that people are safe. But you make a valid point, Councillor Taylor. It is something that we have to get to the bottom of, because already the evidence that's coming out from various experts is we are on trajectory for a third lockdown, a third wave. The evidence so far isn't showing that we've got hospitalisations that are as bad as they were, and the deaths are not as bad as they were. But we've got winter pressures coming up very, very shortly, and I personally think that we need to be very, very careful. So whilst we need to make sure that we carry on business as normal, we can't get our eye off the ball. You got supplementary, Councillor Taylor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think you slightly missed the point of my question, if I'm honest. I wasn't talking about our staff. I was talking about the level of vacancies and the difficulty to recruit people. So my understanding is at the moment we have around 100 vacancies in highways alone. It's very, very difficult to recruit planners. It's very, very difficult to recruit enforcement officers. That's what I'm talking about. Not are we treating our staff well and are we trying to ask our staff to do too much or work in a difficult way, because we all accept that throughout this pandemic, working patterns have been difficult to say the least. That's not the point I'm making. For me, I'd like to see what the council is doing, going, these are the areas where we understand there are shortages. Therefore, we're focusing our skills strategy, we're focusing our apprenticeships on those areas to try and see if we can help ourselves train the people that we need, because we're not going to deliver on our ambitious plans if we haven't got planners to do the planning, or we haven't got highways officers to work on the engineering works that we need. So that's the point I'm making. So I'm looking for a response from you as the leader or from the cabinet to say we recognise. I'm sure if I'm looking at Viv, there's probably shortages within the care sector as well, where we're struggling to recruit. And what are we doing as a council to say we recognise these skill shortages and here's our skill strategy. These are the things that we're doing ourselves to try and assist with that. Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. I thought because you asked me a question which was quite broad, right? Yeah, I thought I should give you a broad answer. But in terms of what we are doing, well, firstly, where we have been through a journey over the last 10 years of actually ripping out a lot of the place-based stuff. And we all saw that. We saw our highways budget going down to literally nothing. We also saw our investment literally disappearing overnight. We also saw that there was very little potential for developing growth and income for future in terms of what we were doing at that moment in time. But are probably aware that we've now got the biggest ever investment plan in Kirklees that has been agreed at full council since 1974. What we've done is we need to start with the senior management team. That's why we've actually got 2 new strategic directors, both who are here, Colin and David, who are now sort of like, beginning to recruit their senior managers, and you were part of that process, and I'm sure other members have been part of that process. You also will recall that in our children's services, we had a lot of temporary staff. A few years ago, we were in the middle of a crisis, and thanks to the hard work of this council, through the leadership of Councillor Viv Kendrick, we now have literally hardly any temporary staff, which is really, really good news. And the reason why that is because we've actually made Kirklees the best place to work for, and at the same time, what we did was we actually became competitive, but not actually making sure that we hollow out the market in terms of social workers. Because what we don't want to do is we don't hollow the market out in such a way that our neighbouring authorities actually end up with no social workers. But that's just one example. In terms of our highways and our planning and all the frontline services that are place-based, we are investing heavily. We are actually going through a massive recruitment process. We have got a workforce strategy. That strategy is changing on the back of the pandemic because there's new ways of working. One of the things that we are doing, the 3 key messages that I want to take away from here, is we are investing in our staff, we are innovating in our services, and what we will do is we need to actually make sure we also become inclusive, because we need to make sure that we get the right staff and actually make sure that we actually include everybody, that we are representative of this council in terms of all the communities. Thank you, John. And I think that brings us to the time. Yes, gone over. So thank you, members, for your questions. We've got a packed agenda, and I'm sure we'll be here for a few more hours. So what I will do, I will move on to item 7, Kirklees Resource and Waste Strategy reference from Council. Is that Councillor Naheed? May the Councillor Naheed,
Leader, could I just question, you said that member questions has come to an end. It's 30 minutes. Presumably that's 30 minutes from when that item starts, not the start of the meeting.
I checked my watch and it was 15:02 and it's now 15:32. Naheed, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. I bring to Cabinet the draft Kirklees Resource and Waste Strategy 2021-2030 for discussion, comment and agreement prior to adoption at full council in September. Last year, we asked our communities what they wanted from their local waste services and were delighted as to how many people came forward and told us what they want is to reduce what the waste they produce, see community reuse schemes introduced and recycle as much of the waste as they produce. The strategy is keeping abreast of the delayed government's environment bill, and it can, at the moment, we're looking at years, and alongside the end of the council's PFI waste contract. It aims to achieve a vision of zero waste to landfill, encourage residents and businesses to reduce, reuse as much of their waste as possible before it comes to be recycled by promoting a more circular economy. The strategy includes 3 themes and they're appended in Appendix 1, starting at page 9 to 66. And the 3 themes are Section 5, page 26, delivering modern sustainable services, and it sets out how we'll enable our residents and businesses to reduce, reuse and recycle as much of their waste as possible. And how will we do that? We will do that through educational workshops on waste reduction and reuse, improved curbside collections and an overall cleaner environment. Section 6, learning by example. we will demonstrate by good practice, improving our own facilities and working practices across all of our operations to lead the way to reduce waste, reuse materials and increase recycling, such as phasing out single use of plastics at our events, supporting our workforce to deliver the cultural transformation required. Section 7 at page 41, supporting Kirklees families and ensuring inclusion, focuses on providing support to families who need it, and in terms of recycling and waste service offers. This is a variety of different ways, for example, via schemes such as our assisted bin collections, and being mindful to provide a more equitable service to allow communities, all our communities, to achieve the same outcomes. The action plan is included and details the initiatives to deliver over the course of the strategy. For example, over the next 12 months, the following will be delivered: a new recycling collection to our commercial waste service, new measures to tackle fly tipping, food waste workshops, a recycling champion scheme, a reuse shop in Huddersfield, a composting scheme, improved litter facilities, a new bulky waste collection system, and last but not least, commence a trial on glass collection at curbside. I ask Cabinet that they approve or agree to approve the draft Kirklees Waste and Resource Strategy 2021-2030, to approve delegated authority to the Strategic Director for Environment and Climate Change in conjunction with the relevant portfolio holders, and Council's Section 151 officer to draw down transformation reserve resources as appropriate to support the development and implementation of the Kirklees Resources and Waste Strategy. Thank you, Leader.
And it will be going to Council as well. Yes, thank you. Councillor John Lawson, you got your hand up. John, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. I didn't realise I even had my hand up at that point. I was still typing. Thank you for that. So I just wanted to mention a couple of things here about the strategy, but more specifically about any contracts we might be entering into. One aspect that we could be looking at here is mentioned kind of indirectly here is the idea of an anaerobic digester for the food waste obligations that may be coming our way as part of the government bill. I would hope that we would be able to recognise that once anaerobic digesters are in place, and they cost millions of pounds, that once we've intervened in the food waste cycle, as it were, volumes of food waste inevitably go down. And it's my fear that investment of millions of pounds into a food waste strategy might not be the best value for our money once those volumes of food waste start to go down. So I'd just like to hear what our thoughts are on that, and whether we can perhaps spread the load of that investment by working with our authority neighbours like Wakefield or Calderdale to see if there's any joint working we can do in that respect. The other point I'd want to make, or I'd like to hear about a little bit, is about the contract length and the opportunity to build in reviews into whatever length that is. If it's 15 years, then every 5 years we should be reviewing if we're getting the best technology on the market or the best value for money that there is out there. So those 2 points then, one is the anaerobic digester and the other is the contract length of any new contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. you can be rest assured that the service and all of us involved in putting together this strategy and the finer details that will come along with the business cases is that we are mindful of the cost and the investment and the years delayed government legislation which may or may not expect us to do certain things. And yes, all of those points that you made in question 1 are things that we've discussed. We've looked at our West Yorkshire authorities about capacity, but when we're talking about this area of our services, there's precious little capacity, but we will carry on talking to our partners, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. We look to government for innovative technology to get us there. So be rest assured that we won't actually rule out or rule in anything that may end up costing us costing the public a great deal of money. So that's question 1. In terms of the contract, we are currently in the process of negotiating arrangements, which I can't talk about because of the commercial sensitivity. And again, you make some valid points that we need to be mindful about new technology, value for money, and being able to be flexible enough to ensure that we have what we need by Kirklees residents. And this draft and the final strategy is based on listening to our residents, listening to our members, and we will continue to do that in order to ensure that we hit the right notes when we go to invest public monies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Naheed Mather. John, you got a supplementary?
Just a quick one.
Yep.
And again, it's the last. The last contract was a 25-year contract, and from my understanding, the last 10 years of it was problematic. We were not getting the best value for money out of that last decade of the contract. It's that I would seek assurance on, that we're not binding ourselves into a very, very long-term contract when technology will overtake us and we will once again be at the bottom of the pool, the bottom of the pile halfway through the contract. That's my fear, and I'd just be interested to see how you're going about doing that. Are you looking at other people's contracts? What's industry standard? Are you looking at other authorities' contracts? How are you going about that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Of course, it would be remiss of us not to see what the current contracts are, or those authorities, bar us, that have renewed, and the terms of those contracts, as long as they're not commercially sensitive. We have, and I can assure you, there is no way we're going to have a contract as long as the one we've had. It just doesn't make sense, because as you sneeze, something's changed behind you, and you cannot be on that track. So basically, I can assure you that we will be having a contract, or negotiating a contract which is possibly half the length of what we've had already. Without putting a finer point on it, as I say, I do know, but I cannot talk about these things as yet because of commercial sensitivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. We'll move on to next question is from Councillor John Taylor. John.
Thank you, Chair. It's 2 comments and 1 question, really. So I'll quickly get the comments out of the way. One, I'm pleased to see a mention of education in the waste strategy. And I must confess, I think this is the 4th or the 5th time I've been meeting about the waste strategy, but every time I find something new to talk about, so it shows the depth and richness of the report, to be honest. But I would hope that education is an ongoing commitment, because I think one of the ways in which we'll improve our recycling is if we get children to badger their parents into recycling properly. So if we invest in our schools, it will help with that. And the other comment was, and I've not noticed this before, but the new residents pack, which I think is an excellent idea about helping residents new to Kirklees understand what we can and can't recycle. But actually, I would suggest that our existing residents could use that as well. So maybe not restricted to just new residents, because I'm sure if you went and asked the man on the street whether they knew what they could or couldn't recycle, they'd invariably get some of it wrong. So it's just a thought. My question really is around our ambitious targets. And I'm looking at page 25 in the pack, which shows the graph, which shows that currently we're at 26.7% recycling. The national average is 43%. It doesn't tell us what best in class is, but we then have looks like a nearly vertical line up to 55% by 2024-25, with no indication of what the steps are to get us there, or what confidence we have that we can achieve that. And it looks like little more than a line drawn on a graph. So I just wonder whether when this is presented to council, perhaps we could put some more detail in here about giving us as councillors some confidence that there is a plan to get us from 26.7 to 55, at what the targets are between now and then, so that there is some way in which we can measure our performance and we can see whether we are on track for that or not. Because as it stands, it doesn't look achievable. When you look at what the national average is, you look at their trend, you look at our trend, and then you go, do I believe we can make that leap in 3 or 4 years? It's a big ask. So I would ask that when this comes to council, we have a little more detail in there that will show us how we believe we can get to that ambitious target. I'm pleased there is an ambitious target, but I think we could do with just explaining a little more how we get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. The education is, you would be pleased to know, is going to be ongoing. And it's an ongoing commitment that we're building into as we move forward. The residents we know don't know, and we are making sure that when we do our estates visits or when we are out in our wards, that we become the champions by actually asking people if they know what to recycle, cross-referencing it to our websites, checking their bins, because the 3 of us in my ward went out for an estates visit, and it's true. People are not sure what they can and cannot recycle and which bins. It's a journey, and we're willing to invest in our residents so that they can invest in their environment. So that will happen. Of course, the targets are ambitious, because when we took on this contract, we were the best performing. We were, back then, we were energy to waste. It was being, part of the contract being sold to the grid.
Waste to energy.
Sorry, waste to energy, thank you. Okay, so yes, I can be confident, because I know we are building capacity, we are investing, we have the skills. I look towards technology to get us there. We cannot make it any worse. Moving forward, I am hoping, I am confident that we will be the best performing, because we're going to be getting to it a bit later than all the other councils who have been locked into their contracts. And yes, you can have a bit more detail, but what I suggest, and I make this plea, that it is a strategy. It isn't a business plan, and there will be many areas that sit underneath, but we need this umbrella to hang all of our ambitions, to carry on listening, being flexible, and incorporating the ideas as we progress to the final negotiated contract that we will get once this is finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Nahid. John, you got a supplementary? No? Councillor Martin Bolt.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just trying to get the vision out of my head now of the Dalton 3 walking around with strains of Freddie Mercury and We Are the Champions in the background. It's not a pretty picture. But we've got before us today a strategy document. So looking at that on page 39, bulky waste collection service. This is something which I'm sure many of us have had issues from our residents with. Residents are paying for a premium service. This is over and above their council tax. They pay for something, and at present it can take 3 weeks from them leaving it outside to be collected. So I'm pleased to say here that the revised booking system will be looked at, and a slot booked, which is what anybody operating premium service should have been doing. But this isn't a strategy. This is service delivery. And Councillor Mather, as a cabinet member responsible, should have been saying to officers, when our residents are paying for a premium service, we don't need to wait for it to go to full council approval. We don't need anything else. Let's get onto this system where the longest it will take is 3 weeks to collect, but we will ring you a day or two before and say, put outside. Because very proud residents don't want to leave bulky items outside their property for 3 weeks, bringing down the neighbourhood. So can I ask that while we're waiting for this innovative revised booking system, that we go back to some basic communication, and when it's booked in, the staff take the resident's phone number, say thank you, the longest you will have to wait is 3 weeks, we will aim to do it before, and we will ring you the day before, which is a bit like you get from a lot of parcel deliveries. They tell you we're going to be delivering tomorrow. I'm sure people wouldn't mind leaving stuff out for a day or something, but 3 weeks leaving it something, an item of waste, a mattress or something else outside your house is not what we should be having in Kirklees. And as I say, that's not a strategic aim, that's a service delivery aim. There are a couple of other items in here which, when we're talking about resource and waste strategy, catering, venues and events, and reducing waste, improving the environment and other aspects. Could I ask whichever cabinet member is responsible for that area, does the council still buy bottled water from Harrogate when we have a perfectly good company in Kirklees, so we can reduce the miles that something travels to get here? We can talk to this company probably about getting the bulk and everything that we need, but it does seem, when you're talking about environmental issues and reducing waste, that having bottled water in Kirklees isn't supportive of the environment or the local companies.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for letting me know that we can't write a strategy. It happens to be my background. I did work in policy making, so I do know what a strategy looks like, and so I'm between a rock and a hard place when you say there isn't enough detail or there's too much detail and this is a delivery plan. It's hitting the right notes in order to provide you with the right amount of information. And yes, when you have 440,000 people living in this district, and you know a few people, because we don't have statistics when you say people are waiting 3 weeks and we need to, get on and do things. All I can say is the past year and a half has been very tough for all of us. There has been a pandemic. Our services have done the very best without reducing many of those services that we deliver. So I would like to thank the staff who have delivered, and like everywhere else, and I've said, they're not robots, they're human beings. Along with everybody else, there is sickness, self-isolation, and all the rest. I would say that the booking system, as you just mentioned, we only talked about it at my briefing yesterday, and we will be looking to ensure that it hits the right notes. But it is sometimes capacity issues, and at the moment they're beginning to rear their heads again. In terms of resources, venues and events and bottled water, as you may have noticed, there's very little water around everywhere. We haven't held any events at any of our venues, so you can be rest assured we haven't been buying bulk buying bottles of water from Harrogate. I understand and I know a lot about circular economy and the local and how important it is in our northern regions and the government's levelling up agenda to ensure that we get the best value, and you make some valid points and we are getting there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And again, I'm minded of another cultural reference there for those of us a certain age. Morecambe and Wise once had that. You might be hitting the notes, but not necessarily in the right order. So bearing your background in mind of strategy, then I'm sure preparing strategies, you'll be aware that there should be measurable outcomes. So with regards to changing the system for bulky weight collections, what measurable outcomes will we have? What timelines can you give for the people of Kirklees that will see an improvement in this scheme?
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. I would say we're getting there. We are hitting the right notes, not just black or white, but the right notes. We are also, we are looking towards ensuring that everything we deliver has measurable outcomes and timelines. There are some, we're talking about the list, there's in the strategy already saying we will deliver in 12 months, this and this. There will be fine-tuning within each of those areas. There is also monitoring and evaluation of measurable outcomes, what we hope to do within 5 years. So I think when you're talking about strategies, it is an umbrella upon which other things are built on, like business cases with deadlines or timelines. So I think I have answered that as fully as I can from a strategy document.
Thank you, Councillor Naheed Mather. Councillor David Hall. David, you got a question?
Yes, thanks, Leader. A couple of comments and a question, if that's okay. First of all, to welcome the substance broadly of this report and the comments that have been sent in from the public. You know, always a lot of sense talked there, and we really have to look at these carefully, particularly from the point of view that really in Kirklees one size doesn't necessarily fit all, and we've seen that just from the topography of the district. That if you live in a row of terraces on a narrow road, you're going to be presented with problems in terms of your own particular presentation of your bins than if you lived in a large detached house up a long drive, for instance, and we have to acknowledge that. The second thing would be just to say about the ambition of the report. I welcome this as far as it goes. There's lots of things in there that many of us have been pushing for many years, and it's good to see that they're in there. There's one or two things I think we could have been a little bit more ambitious on, actually. One is we talk about the tips, but we don't talk much about the accessibility of the tips. And some of our tips really aren't very accessible at all for anyone who is infirm or elderly or disabled. And we could do a lot more to try and make things easier for people to get to the tips. And also what can be taken there. It would be great to get to a position where actually our tips accept more or less anything that people bring, and we'll sort it out. So instead of prescribing what kind of plastic you can recycle, the obvious thing to say is put any plastic in you want and we will sort it out and we'll recycle what we can. And that's the way of making it easier for the recycler. We could have maybe said something about fly tipping, that we would eliminate fly tipping or try to by the changes at the tips, and also by looking into the use of covert CCTV, which we seem to be very reluctant to do in Kirklees, but the possibility is there. Things like reverse vending machines, deposit return schemes have been raised with me, and these are all things that are newly coming month by month into the arena of recycling and waste that really we should be taking account on and looking ahead. So the ambition of it, I think we could go a little further, and also the delivery times, because to wait until 2025 or 2026 for a glass collection scheme, frankly, is much too long. And I think we should be doing that in the short term rather than the long term. So those are my comments. Is that I do welcome it as far as it goes, but my question is, could this is an internet council that we include in it some flexibility?
Sorry, David, we lost you. We lost you. So could you just repeat that your question when you said my question is, and you froze? So sorry, you want to just repeat that question?
I do apologise. Can you hear me now? My question is, when it does come to council, can we be assured that there'll be some flexibility included in that, so that when these new technologies and new ideas come to the fore, we can be quick to recognise them and to try and build them into the strategy where we possibly can, so that we can revise the strategy as it goes on, rather than just say, right, that's the strategy, that's what we're going to do for the next 5 years, regardless of all else. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall, and I'm glad you think it's good, it's ambitious, and I agree with you. We want to make sure that our ambition keeps abreast of all of the developments, and yes, we recognise the geography of our region doesn't allow for one size fits all there, and hence some of the trials, some of the building up the business cases is very much around that. And in relation to our household waste resource centres, we are moving forward in terms of making them more accessible, extending the collection so you can bring many more things into those centres, and lengthening the opening hours, and alongside our citizens who are challenged in relation to certain conditions and may not be able to come themselves. That's been built in, that friends can bring their things, or they can telephone in and we will go and collect. That service is available. In terms of fly tipping, it is certainly one of the things that's in that first 12 months, and we are using CCTV, both overt and covert operations, and it is a blot on our landscape. It is something that we want our residents to work with us, to take pride of place, so that not only is it their environment, it's all those people who come to work, live and play. So that is at the heart of our strategy. And in terms of the glass collection, we are definitely bringing it forward. We will be building the flexibility in the overall strategy. So the strategy is there, but making sure that it's fit for purpose as we go along. And hence the reason why it takes so long negotiating these contracts, especially when it's a public sector. We're talking about procurement, and the procurement of this contract is a huge operation, which also requires capacity. So thank you for taking the interest, reading the strategy. Please keep on talking to myself, and I will ensure that we are incorporating the ideas from our councillors and our residents as we move towards finalising the strategy and the very many business cases that will be built to actually hang all the services that we care so much about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Naheed Mather. Councillor David Hall, have you got a supplementary?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Liz Mage. Liz, your question, please.
Yeah, it was just a comment really. You mentioned about CCTV and enforcement for fly tipping, and I absolutely agree. We need better enforcement for fly tipping, but we need better ways of placing CCTV, because at the moment we seem to need street lamps for CCTV, and of course people fly tip in certain places where they're not necessarily overlooked by houses and do not necessarily have a lot of street lamps. So I think we need to look to the future for better ways of being mobile and agile with our enforcement. And I agree with the comments about accessibility to the tips. I think it's really, really important that we make our tips far more accessible for people to go to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. At the moment, we are making use of mobile CCTV facilities. And yes, you are right. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to actually find the right kind of location, because I've had the cameras posted across the district, and just making sure that, you know, that it catches the culprits in a manner appropriate. So yes, always looking towards that. We are doing quite well in terms of enforcement, and it is actually, we're hoping as we move forward it gets much better. It is something that we have to rely on our residents, yourselves, and members of the public to help us to get the people who are responsible for to name and shame and make sure they don't do it again. And that's the motto. That's going to be what, moving forward, Kirklees is going to have an environment which we're proud of, where we're proud to come and live, work and play, and an environment that's enhanced and hits the climate change targets, because the strategy relies on making sure that alongside we are mindful of our climate change pledges. Thank you.
Thanks, Naheed. Liz, you got a supplementary? Is she frozen? Right, okay. Councillor Will Simpson, you wanted to talk?
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. I actually thought I was coming in straight after Naheed, so this must be my punishment for being late. My apologies.
I thought I'd bring you at the end, because, so you can sort of like listen to everybody and then hopefully add some value.
No, no worries. Thank you very much, Leader. And firstly, I just want to thank all of the officers who've been involved in this and working our waste services more broadly, because it's a lot of work and often a thankless task dealing with our waste. But it's certainly not thankless to us as a cabinet. We really do appreciate it and all of the work that's gone into this. You know, for a number of years, we've had our outcomes determined by our contract. This waste strategy is so important because it reverses that. It's our vision and the outcomes that we want to achieve that will determine our approach to the contract. This is obviously really positive. It's a fundamental shift, which I'm sure that we'll all welcome. There's a lot in there, and we'll be delivering as much as we can, as quickly as we possibly can, as Naheed's spoken to, in the next 12 months alone. We'll have our new commercial waste recycling service up and running. We've got the reuse shop in Huddersfield, which, if successful, will expand across the borough. We've got a composting scheme, improved litter facilities, new bulky waste collection scheme, improved fly tipping response model, and, as has been said, we'll begin our glass collection trial at the curbside next year. Those are obviously just some of the short-term changes before we even get our new contract in place. And as some of the detail in the vision sets out, there's a lot more to come in there over the years to come, all of it underpinned by the values of reducing, reusing and recycling as much as we can. And where we do recycle, we want that to be done sustainably for as much environmental benefit as is possible, because it's not just about what goes in what bin. What happens to the recycling and our waste after the council takes it away obviously matters. we don't want and won't allow our plastic or our waste to be shipped across the world and be burnt on a roadside in Istanbul or in a forest in Malaysia. But as a final comment, it's important for us to also remember that recycling alone isn't going to get us anywhere near our climate targets. We need to reduce the amount of waste we're creating in the first place, as well as reusing what we already have before we recycle, as well as many other big changes such as greening our transport, planting more trees, improving biodiversity, and so much more than that. Waste services alone won't tackle the climate emergency, but they are an important component, and this vision is a really positive one, which will drive our outcomes for the years to come and make a difference for residents. So it's really welcome. Again, I thank the officers for all of the work, and I'm very pleased to second the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Will, for seconding that report and for that insight. Got one more question from Councillor John Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. It's a comment more than, well, I suppose it is a question, it's a plea. When we take this through full council, is it possible either by then or as soon afterwards that we can bring in a change to the rules at the tips to address that issue with the size of trailers? That's been a big issue for a number of years now. We have an opportunity to get it right. Can we please make sure that we fix this problem with how many inches it is? Thank you.
Yes, we'll look into it.
We just done the first item. We've still got another items to go through. First, I'd like to thank all the officers that have worked really, really hard on this. You know, they've done some brilliant work. And I think the other plea I would make is there is still time to feed in. So if anybody wants to feed in your comments or questions, any members of the public, please do so. And councillors, just to say that the public engagement has been really fantastic on this, because if you look at the report, despite the pandemic, it's been one of the better consultations that we've actually taken place in this council. For me, I take the point about the targets, but I would actually question the target in terms it's too low, because we all know over successive administrations, the waste contract was actually providing a really good benefit for us in terms of various other incentives. That's why it's suddenly gone up. But again, you know, around 50%, is that the best we can do? So I think there's some room there for improvement. In terms of the points that Councillor David Hall mentioned, I think they were spot on, Dave. You know, there's a lot of scope in terms of what we can do. But you'll also see that there's an action plan with 9 points. And one of the points in the action plan, which is part of the strategy, Martin, is precisely bulky waste items. So he's in there in terms of what we need to do. But once again, I'd like to say thank you for everybody, and are we all okay to approve this report? Just show hands. We'll be okay. Thank you, members. We'll move on to item 8, which is 2021 2025-26 Bereavement Services Capital Plan, proposed allocation as of 2021-2022. Who's moving this? Councillor Paul Davis. Is it Paul? There's a number of names on the report. Who's Paul? Bereavement Services report?
I didn't expect to be proposing it, but I'm more than happy to I thought it'd be Councillor Simpson.
My apologies, Paul. I thought it was you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Leader, and again my thanks to the officers and everyone who works in bereavement, because obviously it's been an incredibly difficult and challenging past 18 months. This is a really important investment that we're making. Not all of our services are glamorous. Many of them are there for people at the most difficult of times. Bereavement services is obviously one of those. We have a small team that work exceptionally hard to make sure that we have the facilities there for families at those challenging times and provide safe and accessible facilities for visitors and families. That's what this investment is going to provide. It'll deliver extra burial capacity where we know there is the most pressure, including over 600 new plots in Batley, as well as installing new plinths at Hay Lane and making improvements to footpaths, drainage and access at cemeteries. across the borough, including Batley, Dewsbury, Edgerton, Heckmondwike, Lockwood, Skelmanthorpe and Slowett. And where possible, our spending is going to be used for the benefit of local contractors, suppliers and workers as they undertake that work as well. So this is a really, really important investment, and I really do hope that we'll all welcome it. And once again, thank you very much to everyone who's been involved in it. I move it. Thank you, Leader.
Have you got a second before we go on to questions? Do you want to second that, Paul?
I'll formally second.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a question from Councillor John Taylor. John?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say recently, but it wasn't recently, it was last year. I had cause to visit Dewsbury Cemetery to meet with the resident there. And I was quite shocked by the state of the chapels at Dewsbury Cemetery. And I'm just wondering, is there any of this investment that is going to tackle that issue? And if not, what is the council doing about those chapels that are at Dewsbury Cemetery? Because they look dreadful at the moment. And if I don't have any relatives buried there, but if I had relatives buried there, I'd be really disappointed at the state of that, you know, the top part of the cemetery there. So it's just a question around what we're doing about that, because it does need tackling. Thank you.
I think this might be Naheed, so I'll just hand over to Naheed initially.
Actually, it isn't me, but I do know about it. We are at the moment conducting a refurbishment bit by bit, so I think it will happen. There may be delays because of the pandemic. So, but it isn't my area. I'll pick it up.
Thank you, Councillor Naheed. Any supplementary?
I just think even just a bit of tidying up might help. It just looks dreadful at the moment. So just I'm not sure whose area it is, but whoever area it is, if they could take it away and just have a look about what can we do to make it look like a more attractive area, really, given people's sensitivities when visiting the cemetery.
Will, do you want to contribute?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Yeah, I appreciate that, John. I'll take it away and we'll look at it. I have had some conversations recently with officers about maintenance at some of our cemeteries, although I wasn't aware of the particular issue that you've raised. So if we can have a conversation about it after the meeting, or if you can send me an email and I'll follow it up for you, absolutely.
Thank you. And nobody wants to answer the question. Are you all fighting to answer it? Yeah. We'll move on. So we've got a lot of items on the agenda here, and I'm just Jen, I've got it. Don't worry, Martin. I'm trying to get my councillors for a time to get you in, Martin. Martin, don't encourage her, because you know what? If you both get on, right? Yeah, I'll have a job on. So.
Right, thank you, Leader. Pleased to see the report come forward, having held this portfolio some years ago, and I wonder whichever cabinet member is responsible, if they could give us an update. I hope it's you then, Will, and not Naheed. Was it something I said? If we could have an update on the meetings that are taking place of the Bereavement Services Partnership. I certainly used to find it very useful when I was cabinet member, where you bring people from the wide sphere. You had clerics, funeral directors and other people, and you get to talk to them and you get some insight into their views. And it was from that our administration heard many of the problems at Dewsbury, and we had started to look at plans for having a new crematorium built at Dewsbury, which would, I believe, still have required an Act of Parliament because it was near a highway. And could ask, if we're not looking at it at the moment, having been sadly to one or two services which are still not up to capacity, but you can see that as we come out and you start to get more people attending Dewsbury Crem, it's the poor relative between the ones around it. You go to any of the other crematoria and their facilities are better laid out, and bereavement is something that we need to look sensitively. And I think we ought to be looking at the capital investment of a new crematorium to serve North Kirklees and the wider area. Something else which I've been pleased to see partially develop is mentioned on it's either page 25 or page 69, depending on which way up it is. The Liversidge Cemetery, natural burial, again, is something I've been waiting for some time to see the council embracing. There have been a few natural burial private sector, but the one for the council to run. And I'm just wondering why it's taking so much to become operational. It's been levelled, drained, there's been work put in. And we talk now about phase 2 works, including planting. What planting is going on there in a natural burial ground? Because, to my mind, it should remain natural. Liversidge Cemetery, down Clough Lane, has already got trees around it. There's hedgerows all around the area that we're using. And really, it should remain as natural. Usually with a natural burial, if people wish to have a memorial as such, they would plant a tree at some point in that place. You don't get headstones and that. So if the cabinet member could enlighten as to what the planting will be and making sure that it is in keeping. And just as a final comment, it never ceases to amaze me the way that the council services are allocated, because it seems strange to anybody reading the report that we're delegating authority to a service director for culture and the visitor economy for bereavement services. Yeah, we used to have a head of bereavement services in my day, and I hope that we have somebody that's got that sympathy in dealing with the trade. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shabir. I dare not think how old I was when you were a cabinet member, Martin. I think I'd probably be in primary school. On your point about on your point about bereavement partnership, we have the bereavement forum, which I think will be, from your description of the partnership, as you said, it has been operational throughout the pandemic. I attended my first meeting as the cabinet member recently, so they have been ongoing. We've had a lot of positive things come out of that. They've been involved in and informed the COVID memorial work that's been ongoing, as well as, of course, raising issues about, with bereavement services and informing them about the challenges that they face as private operators as well. So that is ongoing. I'm going to continue to attend whenever I can as the cabinet member. Our new service director will be attending with me as well. So yeah, that work is ongoing, and it is certainly beneficial for us and I believe for them working in partnership. On your point about natural burial, obviously we've got Hay Lane as a natural site, and as you pointed out, we've got here in the report the phase 2 works. I do trust, as you say, that any planting will be absolutely in keeping with the nature of the site, the natural nature of the site, should I say. I can have a look at the specifics because I don't know exactly right now, but I trust that it is, but I'll take a look at it for you, absolutely.
Thank you. That's a really good report. Investing £1.24 million in our bereavement services, including investment in the Disability Crematorium, which is really, really welcome, and plus those areas that Will mentioned. So that's really, really good news. And once again, thank you for all the officers who actually worked behind the scenes to get this work to bring here. So are we all okay to approve that report? Just a show of hands. Be fine. Thank you. We'll move on to item 9, which is 2021-22, 22-23 corporate landlord asset investment capital plans, proposed allocation of capital funding. That Paul Davis, Councillor Paul Davis. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, this report identifies themes for programmes of work that are funded in financial years 2021-22 and also 2022 to 23 from the corporate landlord asset investment programme. So the corporate landlord compliance and corporate landlord suitability and the corporate landlord suitability programmes. All of these referenced funding programmes are contained in the 5 capital plan approved by Council on the 10th Feb 2021. So what we're asking today is for members to consider and approve the baseline programmes along with the broad themes of the investments, which you'll see in Appendix A, and to authorise the delegated powers for officers to manage the programmes within the overall budget envelopes. That's in order for that priority projects can be identified, designed and delivered. Of course, these baseline investments are all about maintaining facilities and addressing urgent disrepair and are within a 2-year rolling programme which runs alongside and complements wider capital programme, and members are asked to note the connection, the connectivity between baseline investment, partners and strategic programmes, for example the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So I would propose this to members, asking for their support in implementing, as I said, the baseline programme.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Davis. So I got a second before I bring the questions. Yeah, thanks, Peter. Secondly, Councillor John Taylor. John, you got a question? Comment?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, please, if I may. The first one, when I look at Appendix A, Paul, we've got various locations, structural and boundary wall repairs, £10,000 a year. Could I ask what the backlog is in this area and how much this is going towards addressing that?
I will certainly get you that information, Councillor Taylor. I haven't got that to hand at this point, but yes.
And I raise that because I have a worry that we just see these numbers and we just go, well, that's all okay. But I know the issues there are with trying to get any boundary walls repaired, and I just think it needs a bit more of an in-depth look to see what is the backlog, and therefore are we comfortable that we're putting the right amount of funding into this year and next year. So Paul, if you wouldn't mind taking that away. And then I have a second ask for you. It's another one you're going to take away, Paul, because I don't expect you to have the answer. When's my library going to get repaired? But seriously, I can't see libraries mentioned anywhere on here. I'll take you. I know you're coming to see Cliff House, and if we get a chance, I'll take you when you come to see Cliff House. But we've got a leaking gutter. That leaking gutter has been leaking for years. Now, when you go inside the library, you can see where the impact of that is coming through. You've got plaster coming off the wall. You've got an area that you can't use very well. And what really originally was a small job is developing into a bigger and a bigger job. So I'd just like to know where in this is the money that would tackle things like that. And I will take you and show you it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor Taylor. I'm certainly aware of some of the problems. I was visiting a number of libraries, or have been over the last 2 weeks, and yes, I know that we have got some issues. I've not had the chance myself yet to follow up on that, but I do intend doing that. We've certainly, and I'm sure you're aware, are looking at a number of the libraries in terms of significant investment on refurbishment. But you're right, I think there is a general issue that we need to look at and how we address that. So it would be good to have a chat when we get together on that. And it's certainly logged in with me following what I've seen in some of the libraries I've visited to date as well. Okay.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions, so are we all okay to approve that? Just show hands, members. Thank you very much. Next item is item 10, Place Standard Investment Fund Funding Criteria and Decision Making. Councillor Cathy Scott. Cathy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The report comes before Cabinet to ask you to support the establishment of a Place Standard Fund and approve the criteria of the decision-making process for the Place Standard Investment Fund. Place Standard engagement allows us a greater opportunity of understanding our communities and the challenges that they face, so councillors can be at the heart of this. And we can also see what the community's aspirations are. This will build on a better understanding, and it can steer us away from this one-size-fits-all, because it certainly doesn't out in our communities. We have to compare. We can't put like-for-like rural with Huddersfield and Dewsbury areas. We've got to have a better understanding. It will allow us to have a more focused, and it gives people and places a local identity. And I think that's what the golden thread that's been missing here. It's about the identity. It will allow us to be more joined up and cohesive. It will bring communities together, solving, resolving and finding solutions together. But having a voice too, that's the most important thing we said when we set off out on this journey. It will have a resource in place to help us deliver this, should Cabinet be minded to approve this. And we will see better engagement and we'll see what difference it makes in the future. So I ask that Cabinet approve the creation of specific reserve. It's an initial 500,000 allocation to the endorsed action plans through 2021 to 22. That Cabinet approve the creation and delegation to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Housing and Democracy, and to make the decision on the allocations of this fund up to a maximum of 50,000 per ward per financial year. Cabinet is asked to consider subsequent proposals for place standard funding in the future for place standard funding in which the annual budget 22-23, and there's important criteria here that you to know. Page 95 to 99 and Appendix 1 and 2 set out the citizen engagement design principles, and the other one here, Appendix 2, is the place standard investment fund criteria guidance. It's important that you know that. I move this report, Chair.
Councillor John Taylor, could you hand up?
Did you allow somebody to second it first? Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Cathy, for the report and the officers that worked on this. I welcome this. As you probably all know, I'm a huge advocate of place standard. I was an early adopter and we've used it twice within my ward, and I aim to use it again once the pandemic sort of clears off and we can actually get out and properly engage and talk with people again. I do have some concerns a little bit about this. One, I agree one size doesn't fit all, but also with some of the stuff that I've seen coming through in the feedback on this, it is very place-based. And some of the wards are a lot bigger than other wards geographically. So actually having the same amount of money available for each of them does put some wards at a huge disadvantage. Secondly, one of my concerns is it talks about not being able to be used where it would supplement things that were ordinarily funded by the council's budget. Quite often, and in fact I would say the majority of the things that are in action plans tend to be things that are in council budgets. So actually this approach is going to be extremely restrictive about how you can actually address things that are in action plans, because most of the things in the action plans will be ruled out as not eligible based on this criteria. So I hugely welcome the investment and the direction, but I do question whether this actually will solve the problems we're trying to solve. And I think it's putting too many restrictions in place, whereas actually what we do with place standards is we listen to people. And our job is to respond to people. It's not to turn around then and go, computer says no, because what you've asked for is something that should be funded from a council budget, but we know that we've got a backlog and we're not going to get around to it for 10 years, so you'll have to live with what you've got. So I do have reservations, and I would ask the council, the cabinet rather, I would ask the cabinet to think again on it and perhaps reflect and maybe have a look at some of the action plans that are already there available from some of those early adopters like my ward, to see how much would be, because I had a conversation with an officer on Friday about this, to look through our action plans to identify which of the items on the action plans would be eligible, and we were struggling to find many. Now that will differ across wards, I am sure, because the responses and the things we need to address in wards differ very, very much across wards, but I would ask that we look again at this. I think we've got too tight a criteria here, and I think you will mean that we don't meet the expectations of our residents when we said we'd listen to them. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Taylor. Your comments are noted on that, and I think you're right that, if there is problems with action plans and criteria, we need to ensure that, the community's voice is heard, and, we've got to be fair that There is some things that we will be able to deliver, and we have to be honest to say there will be things that we can't. If it's caught up in a system and backlog and reasons like that, we can challenge it. But I think you're absolutely right. I do think it's something that we can look at, but I do think we can still enable this to go forward, but equally look at some of the processes in it.
Thank you, Councillor Cassie Scott. Councillor David Hall, you got a question, comment?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Well, following on from Councillor Taylor's comments, really, which was going through my mind at the time, is that it does look, with the restrictions that's been placed on what we will be able to bid for, it does look rather restrictive, and for the benefit of a 50 grand grant, it does look as if the bureaucracy behind it is going to be quite cumbersome as well. And I wonder whether that's been thought of, because there's 2 pages here of very thick rules and regulations and how this will apply. And I would have thought for a 50 grand grant or even one smaller than that, it would be easier just to give the wards the 50 grand and, you know, to the councillors and say, well, you know, you're elected, you know your patch, you know the issues that the residents want sorting out. In fact, I know them because I've got a Labour leaflet somewhere with them all written on. I must look that up sometime. But you get my drift, that there's got to be a proportionality between how much money we want for the grant and the bureaucracy that sits behind it. And I wonder whether that's really the right balance here. Having said that, of course, I do welcome that this is available.
Yeah, I've read the report, and I think the key driver will be if you've got a place standard in place, and I think you've already got that, John. So I think you're already on the front foot. What worries me is areas where they don't have a place standard tool agreed, then you don't matter if you tick all these, you won't get far. So I think I understand what you're saying. I've looked at the criteria, although it's only 2 pages, it's so broad, and if you already agreed a place standard, then you've actually already got there. And I think that, you know, I don't see why we should defer it, to be honest with you. I think we've got enough there to actually move forward. And you have got a place standard agreed, haven't you, John? So I think you're probably ahead of the game.
So Chair, I have got a place standard. I have action plans. I've had action plans for probably over a year. I've been frustrated at the ability to progress the action plans because there wasn't funding available. The funding's coming available now, but the criteria rules most of the action plan out. That was my point. I think we're being far too restrictive with action plans. We should just be saying, if it meets the place standard, you put forward a bid. Don't put any criteria in place. We just have to agree it with Cathy and the Chief Executive if that's the way you want to delegate it. I would suggest you approve this and take an action to review the criteria, and then we can fix it that way round.
Yeah, I think Councillor Taylor and Councillor Hall have made some really valid points here. I do think we should move to receive this report and the recommendations, but to go away and work with the Chief Exec to review the criteria, because as John says, they actually have got their plans in place, but this new funding would rule you out of any of it. So you're just chasing for nothing. So yeah, I absolutely agree. So can I move this report?
Yeah, and we can, just because we've got credit, you know, we can change it and review it. What I don't want is, because the next time we'll probably meet will be September, October, and I don't want to push this into the long grass, and you miss an opportunity. But I just said, look at the criteria, and even if you meet the criteria, you haven't got a place standard, you can't move forward. End of story. David, did you want to come in? Sorry, Liz. Councillor Liz Mage.
Yeah, thanks. Just a comment, please, for Councillor Scott. If the monies are not going to be looked at until your action plan is published, can you look at the capacity to be able to publish those action plans? Because at the moment, that is also a hold up in the system for us to actually be able to do the work that we would like to do with the money, because we've got delays in publishing, in the support for publishing those action plans. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Smith, I'll make sure that that's looked into, because that's important, because all that work, and it also tells the community that you're actually looking at and doing something. So absolutely 100%.
Right. Okay. So that was good. A good debate and discussion and sort of brainstorming as well. So what we'll do, we'll agree the report and the points that have been noted. Andre's picked them up, and Cassie's picked them up as well. And we'll take them fully on board in terms of moving forward. So is that okay, members, in terms of moving forward? Thank you very much. Item 11, staying put policy refresh. Councillor Viv Kendrick, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. We have a staying put policy in Kirklees, like all local authorities have to have. I have to say, our staying put policy had room for improvement, and the service, children's services, are creative and good listeners to our young people and our foster carers, looking at how it should be. Not all young people are the same. I know they all try to be the same, to be part of a group, but they aren't. Not all young people are ready to live independently at the age of 18, not financially ready, not emotionally ready, not ready without anxiety, and not ready to live independently with confidence. Some can, some can't. And I don't think any of us as parents thought, oh, young Jimmy's now 18, chuck him out, he's on his own, you know, and the staying put policy aims to address that. Many foster carers and young people have relationships with both parties feel are beneficial for the young person to stay with the family past 18. Our current staying put policy probably is what you might say is a bit restrictive, in that to some extent foster carers can be disadvantaged financially if they only have place for the children that are in their care already. They can no longer continue as foster carers, and we lose all that experience and skills, and that isn't right. So the service has listened very, very carefully to foster carers, to our young people who are looked after, to our care leavers, about what is needed. And this refreshed policy, I think, goes a long way to address this. It enables foster carers to continue providing a home for these young people to receive the support and care they need, and it enables us to continue to recognise the skills of those foster carers and not disadvantage them financially. I have to say the service has been absolutely exemplary in listening and working towards a policy that really does address things. It isn't a one-size-fits-all. It isn't a policy that just stays as it is. It will be a living document that the service is committed to living to and changing and improving as needs arise. I have to say, if anybody has any technical issues, Elena, but she has quietly sat through the business of this cabinet so far in case you have need for any technical issues. But can I ask colleagues to refer to page 111 at 6.1, where we are asked to approve the updated policy, to approve and agree option 2 as an approach to implementing the policy and the associated changes, and that future updates of the staying put policy are given to delegated officer decision to the Service Director for Family Support and Child Protection. And that is because there is this huge commitment to make it move forward as a continuing living document to do the right thing by our young people and by our foster carers. So I propose this and ask colleagues to agree that in that way.
Carol, are you going to second it? Yes.
Yes, I'll second that.
Any comments or questions anybody got? No? So can we just have a show of hands that we all agree? Thank you very much. Yeah, and the item before we did, I looked, while you were talking, I looked, and I went, I think they're getting a bit tired. But anyway, let's move on to item 11, care leavers guidance and financial guidance policy refresh. Again, Councillor Viv Kendrick. Viv, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. I'm constantly saying to councillors and to officers and to services in this authority that all of us are corporate parents. All of us have a responsibility. And again, as I reiterated in the previous report, not all young people are the same. They have different needs and at different times. The Care Leavers Support and Financial Guidance Policy Refresh, it's a zippy title, I know. This policy provides more flexibility and more creativity in seeking positive outcomes for our young people. It's really avoiding that situation of the computer says no. And this is a result yet again of the service listening so carefully to our care leavers and our foster carers and officers within children's services and me to really get to the bottom of what we need to do to support our young people at different points in their life and development. And it isn't about grudgingly providing the legal minimum financial support for our care leavers, but seeks to provide the best outcomes for our care leavers to meet their individual needs. This is like the previous policy, a living document that will continue to be renewed and outcomes measured to meet the changing needs of young people. And if nothing else, COVID has taught us that needs can change in a moment, a flash of time. I have to thank the service for their creative development of this policy. Yet again, it is a piece of exemplary work, and I can't say how grateful I am to the service for it. And before I finish, just to hark back to an early question time, children's services have no agency workers, social workers. We grow our own social workers, and that is because the work of Elaine and people like Elaine to take on young people who finish their course at university and provide really experienced social workers to help develop them over the years. So we grow our own social workers, so we aren't seeking elsewhere. We're doing a good job as it is. But anyway, can I refer colleagues to page 166 to point 6.1, where I ask colleagues to approve the updated policy, and at 6.2, that future updates are delegated to the service director, because I say the service continues to seek to improve, to listen, and to make this a living document that will provide the best outcomes for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Viv Kendrick. Carol, you want to second this?
Yes, I'll second it.
Thank you. Excellent report. And just to mention that the both reports are not asking for any money. So they're reviewing all this and getting more bang for the buck with existing resources. So that's an excellent report. Thank you very much. So are we all okay to approve that? Just put your hands up. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item 13, Financial Outturn Report 2020-2021, to include the Revenue, Capital and Housing Revenue Account, Outturn Position and Annual Report on Treasury Management. Councillor Paul Davis, over to you. Paul?
Yep, thank you, Leader. Yeah, this report is largely for noting, but has some specific recommendations, as well as looking to reaffirm the proposed use of existing reserves, endorse the proposed use of new reserves, as set out in the report, approve capital rollover proposals, as set out in the report, and also to approve the updated capital plan profile over 2021-26 period. There's a few key points I really want to go through, which reflect the report. And I think, it certainly doesn't need to be said that in terms of the difficult year that we've been through 2020-21, but the actual report is written large throughout this, really, the challenges that we faced through our, not only us as councillors, as council officers, but also our communities, voluntary support, providers, businesses, etc. And the council has met those challenges and continues to do so. We've kept essential services running throughout this unprecedented times, get my teeth in, alongside continuing to support our most vulnerable and protecting NHS services and doing what we can, and I think quite successfully, supporting our local economy in line with many of the national directives that we received. So on to specifics in terms of the report. We've achieved a break-even position on general fund, 274 million revised net budget. But in getting there, we've had to manage the base budget spend, but also a funding alongside that of 200 million unplanned COVID-specific additional spend. As we've discussed a number of times, this has put huge pressure on our team, and they've met that challenge again and certainly worked within all directives and eligibility criteria, assurance, etc. Moving on, we also within the report have the dedicated school grants deficit at year end. This is now 26 million and an increase of 11 million in year. This is mainly due to high needs issues, and currently a management plan is being drafted with the Department of Education to hopefully address this issue, and this will be submitted by the end of July. And the aim is to get the deficit position down over time to break even. That will be done through a number of things. There will be the transformation agenda that we will work with internally with pupils with additional needs, alongside obviously government funding to support this. One of the issues that we face, and a key issue, has actually been linked to the government funding, and I think you'll probably recall that the government did not release the 7 million they identified that we needed for high needs funding immediately, but are doing that over a period of 7 years. So that's in increments of £1 million per year, so that is also contributing significantly to our deficit. In terms of the housing revenue account, this is in deficit of 2.6 million. Some of this is technical in terms of accounting issues, some of it is COVID impacted. And we have 56 million HRA reserve at year end. Capital outturn, about 94 million. And within the report, you'll see that this includes the capital rollover proposal totaling about 26 million. This is largely due to timing issues and some reprofiling of plan requirements over the 21-26 period. Collection fund, we have a headline year-end deficit of over 30 million, but 24 of this is purely technical, related to extended retail reliefs. And then on general fund reserves, the year-end position, there is a significant increase, but again, largely due to timing issues on COVID-related funding received in 2020-21, which we can roll forward through reserves into 21-22, and will be applied again in 21 and 22. So just looking forward, and we'll continue to use the term challenging times. We certainly will continue to face challenges. It's very much a transitional period for the pandemic, as we know. I think we have various reports of what's going to happen, maybe going to happen, and clearly a lot of uncertainty at the moment. We've still got some COVID funding streams in 21-22, including business grant funding, and some funding around infection control measures. But interesting to note, and this is fairly recently on the BBC, again discussion around a hole in council finances nationally, and it was quoted as around about 3 billion. So if you took an average across the 314 councils, probably around about a 10 million average per council. And our team, when they've looked at our own position, think that that could be around about 70 million COVID funding pressure still across our multi-year MTPF for 21 to 26. And this will mainly come through and wash through the impact of council tax, business rates, and service income losses over the medium term. So all existing business assumptions will be reviewed as part of our emerging medium-term financial strategy refresh for 22-23. So as I said, just wanted to bring some of the key points out of the report, and would now like to move forward the recommendations as we see on section 7, page 234, and propose that, I'll move that to members.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Davies. I'd like to second that report. Before we move on to Councillor John Taylor, you've got a question, comment?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul. I've read the report. There's an awful lot of data in here, detail and numbers. And I'll be honest, I've struggled a little bit to follow all of it through. I've been trying to track through to make sure that we're getting the money we need to address the additional costs we've incurred or the income we've lost as a result of COVID. And I think it says we have, but it's probably not easy to read. And I just wonder whether that's something, I know we don't know going forward, and all we can do is make estimates about what we think will happen. But the costs we have incurred to date, my reading of it, I think, have been covered. But I just wonder if you could clarify that.
Yep, sure. This has been picked up in a number of different forums, to be fair, and in discussion, certainly with Eamon on this issue. He's pretty straightforward at this point. You know, he can't give a definitive answer because of the way that funds are basically coming through and transitioning through with ourselves. So this doesn't sound, to be fair, a satisfactory answer, but at this point I think it's fairly difficult to give an absolute definitive answer. Clearly, the position we're in terms of the fantastic work of the finance team is a very good position. But I think if Eamon was sat here, he'd be saying pretty much the same. He can't categorically say absolutely there's a complete match with everything that's come through because of the way that the funds flow through. So, as I say, probably not a satisfactory answer. But
can I help you?
Yeah.
But basically, what we had an income deficit of 15.2 million, and the compensation that we claimed back was 8.7. So that means that there still leaves a shortfall of 6.5 million. That's in the report. How Eamon interprets that or doesn't, right? Yeah, then that's up to Eamon. But as far as I can see, that what our income losses has not been compensated with by the scheme because the rules don't allow it. How you want to read that, John, is entirely up to personal interpretation. But that's based on the figures.
So, if I can just come back.
Yeah, sure.
That's partly where I was coming from, because when I read 1.24, it says, of the 48.7 million additional spend, 32.7 was eligible for funding through specific funding streams. So that leaves you with a deficit of 16 million service pressures, alongside the 15.2 million income losses, which, as you say, Shabir, you made reference to. But it then goes on to say these were offset corporately by the unring-fenced funding. And in the next paragraph, it says the government allocated 4.6 billion nationally, of which our share was 35.8 billion in 4 tranches of unring-fenced COVID funding. So we got another 35.8 million on top of the 48.7 million, which kind of suggests it does cover it. And if we got a further 8.7 million, which is referenced in 1.2.8, I add all those numbers up, and it sounds like we got enough money to cover what we've identified in the year that has gone. We can't look forward. And these are financial statements. So these are historic. These are what happened. We can't look forward with any confidence and say what's going to happen in the future. I agree. But I'm just trying to get to that bottom line as of in the last financial year. We know what the figures are because they're there in black and white. They can't change. So if I've read it right, I think we have had enough money to cover both those loss of income and those spending pressures which we identified and attributed to COVID. And that's all I'm simply trying to get the answer to.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, but this is how I interpret the figure. Full year position includes unbudgeted COVID impacts of 63.9 million, before funding offsets made up of 48.7 additional spend and 15.2 lost income. So there's two issues, right? One is the income and one is the issue around additional spend. Now, out of the income, so basically the first figure, the way I read it, has been compensated for. But the 15.2 million, 8.7 was basically compensated for. That still leaves a shortfall of 6.5 million. But I will look at Paul to...
I can clarify, and this is partly my fault, because you're right, John, I'm talking about looking forward, because that's the point I ended. You're absolutely correct. In terms of 2021, then that's not an issue. That was covered. So your analysis is correct. My apologies. I was talking about the wash through going forward. So certainly in terms of 20 to 21 to date, that's covered, and that's covered through a whole range of combination of funding streams, etc. But the comment you've made about looking at how those funds are now coming through and various other things that we need to look at for the 21-22, then certainly that's an issue. And it's entirely my fault. I was referring to that rather than 2021. So yeah, I confirm that is a straightforward yes. I've got myself into more problems though. Sorry.
Recompensation from that?
2021, we have actually pretty much straightforward. Yes, we are covered in terms of that. What's come in?
The unring fence funds that the council received from the government covers not only part of the additional spend, but it also covers part of the loss of income. If you add the figures together, you've got 69.3. If you add up the ring fence money plus the unring fence money plus that 8.7 million lost income, it more than covers the 63 million. Honestly, they do add up.
My learned cabinet colleague, Councillor Paul Davies, has actually emphasised that as well. So thank you very much for both your clarifications. Councillor David Hall. David, you got a question, comment?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just looking at the bottom line, really, that it's good that we've come in on budget this year, or near as darn it. But just looking at the reserves position, it does conceal the fact that the total reserves have gone up from £116 million to £197 million during last year. And I know what you're thinking now. Oh yeah, there's some of that's for COVID and some of that's the schools and everything that's been amassing for payment this year. But even excluding the schools and the public health and the collection fund for the business rates and the council tax shortfall, reserves have still gone up by about £50 million. So we need to acknowledge that huge increase. My simple question is, all that £50 million is spread across various different lines of different reserves and things. Has that all been claimed? Has it all got its hat and coat on, or has it been kind of scattered about to, well, dare one say, make sure it doesn't appear?
If I've got the question correct, you're referring to have the reserves been allocated going forward? Is that what you're asking? certainly I know a significant element of that has been allocated, and because of what we've just been talking about in terms of, and as we referred to in the report, some of that is because of that rollover as such. In terms of a precise number, again, I haven't got that I can give you, straight away. But I think part of that is certainly linked to what the discussion we've just had. I'm more than happy to have a chat about that, after this meeting. But I don't believe that, in fact, we are looking to be growing our reserves in coming years. In fact, from discussions with Eamon, one of the things that we have concerns about is increasing pressure on reserves because of the challenges we may face going forward, and we probably will face going forward in terms of funding.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Davis. Councillor David Hall, any supplementary?
Yes, I do thank Councillor Davis for that answer. Perhaps a question for the leader then, given that the reserves have increased so much, and given some of the things which were raised right at the beginning of this meeting, which were questions about the capacity of the council in various departments, and planning and highways were both mentioned, that our capacity is severely stretched at the moment. Would it not be an ideal time to start building back some of that capacity where it's needed, so that we can actually get some of these very important schemes finished off?
Yeah, completely agree with you, David. And we have already asked the questions. That's why our two brand new directors are busy getting a full complement of staff, so we can start delivering. As you know, was it last cabinet meeting? No, cabinet before. But I can't remember the exact date. But we've already started to accelerate the big master plans. That's additional resource that we're bringing in. No doubt on the back of that, we'll be actually recruiting our own teams because we do need to start delivering. So yes, bottom line is, thank you, Dave. Any more questions before we? No. Okay, Cabinet, can we all agree this report? Just show hands or nods. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, which is item 14. Thank you for waiting patiently. My apologies. If I'd have known you were going to come, I would have actually rejigged the report before you got printed, but we've got to go through a process. So item 14 is St John's Church of England VC Infant School Governing Body statutory proposals to change the upper age limit of the school. So, Councillor Carol Patterson, over to you, Carol.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report details the governing bodies of St John's Infant School, their statutory proposal to change the upper age range of the school, or ostensibly, instead of being just an infant school, becoming an infant and junior school and an all-through school. In January 2020, the Council led a non-statutory consultation based on St John's desire to become an all-through school. We held that non-statutory consultation, which the outcomes were then presented to the Cabinet last September 2020. And at that Cabinet meeting, a decision was made not to proceed with the proposal and to leave things and the age range as they were. I mean, that was, at that time, that was because the consultation had revealed that the proposals were not a whole system solution with a long-term sustainable model for each school in the area, because St John's, the proposals to change the age range of St John's would actually affect two neighbouring schools, Westmore Junior School and Boothroyd Primary School, sorry. And so the proposal as was were not, as I say, a whole system solution. And also there was a risk of reducing parental preferences in the future. So once the Cabinet had made that decision, the St John's were perfectly within their right to ask as a C of E school, to ask the Diocese of Leeds to support their publishing their own statutory proposal to become an all-through school. They launched that on the 29th of April, and this report now today is the result of that consultation. You have in front of you, in the report, details of that consultation that the school undertook, and you've also got very lengthy details of the school's organisation advisory group, which before any changes go anywhere, including here, the Cabinet, which is the decision-making body in this case, they're thoroughly looked at by that school organisation advisory group. There's two elements to that, and one is looking to see, reviewing whether or not the statutory process was undertaken correctly, and the SOAG, if I may call it that, that met back in June, agreed that yes, the statutory process had been followed. It also looked at the DfE's statutory guidance that we as Cabinet members need to consider in making this decision today. And from 2.81 and to presumably 2.9 in this document, you've got all the different factors there that had to be looked at. Having looked at all of those, and it took us a lengthy, it was a lengthy process, and Councillor Smage was there as well as a member of that group. We actually met for over 6 hours, I think it was. We took looking at all of this, the information that the school had so diligently provided. But even so, unfortunately, we asked them to go away and consider things in a little bit more detail. And they had about 4 weeks to do that. And again, the school very diligently did do that. Some of the things that we asked them to look at were more detailed costs around funding, more detail about the actual pupil numbers that may be coming to the school in the future, and more detail planning for the actual implementation of the proposal, should it be accepted. And I myself went with officers, and we visited the 3 schools as well after the SOAG meeting, and discussed all of the proposals with the heads and governing bodies at the 3 schools most affected by this proposal. And the conclusion that I wish to put to the Cabinet today is that I really want to thank the governing body of St John's for the work that they put in to this proposal, and I certainly understand their desire to become an all-through primary school. I want to thank the governing body and the head teacher here today for their professional engagement with the local authority decision-making process, and, as I say, all the work that went into their presentation to the SOAG group and the information that's been provided since. It is important that the outcomes for children are at the heart of any decision making, and this needs to be in the broadest sense of the meaning, including but not limited to educational outcomes and the part the family and the whole community play in this. A sense of place where children are at heart of the community is really important, and a strong local school system which underpins that is essential. The proposal made by the governing body of St John's Infant School presents a very finely balanced choice between the opportunity to reduce a transition point, i.e. children having to move schools at the end of year 2, which the opportunity to reduce that, which evidence suggests can improve outcomes for children, and the risk of destabilising a local school system with the impact that that would have on the outcomes for other children. And another consideration is the fine balance between improving choice for some parents by enabling their children to stay longer at St John's Infant School, while reducing opportunities for other parents to secure a place at the school in the future. Where there are risks highlighted with developing Key Stage 2 provision at St John's with more planning and additional support, this alone would not be the reason to reject the proposal. But having carefully considered all the information contained in this report, alongside the information I gathered and visiting all the 3 local schools and speaking to the leadership teams, as I've already pointed out, I believe that there are other ways to maximise the outcomes for children in the area outside of this proposal. As difficult as it is, my recommendation to the Cabinet today is that it does not approve the statutory proposals put forward by the governing body of St John's Infant School. They have got the right to appeal to the school's adjudicator, and I would like to offer the support of officers to St John's and other schools in the area to explore how they can work together to ensure the best possible outcomes for the children and their families. So, as I say, it is with some regret, and it's been a finely balanced decision to come to, but it is little seems to have changed between the decision that the Cabinet made back in September to the present day. And as I say, it is my recommendation that this Cabinet does not approve the statutory proposal today. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I second this proposal of Carol's, and it is with regret. And it is very finely balanced, as she says. There is clear evidence of a potential negative impact on at least one other school in the area, and I can't escape the government guidance that says local authorities and governing bodies do not take decisions that will have a negative impact on other schools in the area. I understand parents' points of view and the schools, but with regret I do support this proposal.
Absolutely, and I've read the report. I've also had a summary of the report and listening to you, and also with the conclusion in terms of having that wider responsibility to make sure that no school gets adversely impacted. I think it's the right decision that we have got in front of us today. So, is anybody that wants to say anything? Liz, your name was mentioned. Have you got any observations, any comments? No? That's...
Well, I was just going to say that I think it's important what's been suggested that officers support schools to work together to find a solution, because I can understand the perspective of St John's as well, and I think it's really important that everybody can work together to bring forward a solution to this. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. That's a very important point, that, you know, just because we are not agreeing with the recommendation, I think that working together within the school community to get another solution, maybe, you know, that we've not thought of, that would be excellent. So thank you very much, Liz, for that contribution. So are we okay? Just put your hands up to approve the recommendation. Thank you very much, members, and once again, thank you for attending and your patience. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is item 15, building community and voluntary capacity through integrated approaches, grant funding distribution and anchor organisations. Is that Councillor Mustard Khan? Muz, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks approval to make a grant payment of $360,000 over a 2-year period to third sector leaders. This is NHS monies, and third sector leaders have been appointed under a competitive tender process to enable them to develop and fund local voluntary sector community anchors that support the primary care networks as part of the integrated model. Our approach to embedding council social prescribing link workers into primary care networks is a good example of integration across health, social care and the voluntary sector, and is attracting national attention as an example of innovation within the health and adult social care sector. The approach transfers NHS money to the council to invest in community capacity through the anchor networks. It builds on what has worked well in responding to the pandemic. It fits in with the council's voluntary sector strategy, and through working with the third sector leaders, we'll see the council making more use of the expertise that exists in the local voluntary sector.
Thank you, Councillor Muscan. There's a number of members that have got their report names on the report. So, who's seconded it?
Liz wants to comment.
Yeah, right, Kathy.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Kathy. Liz, you got your hand up. Councillor Liz Mage, over to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if it's not mentioned anywhere, but it's about community capacity and gaps in that provision. And I wonder, as it's about place-based working as well, whether the contract could include discussing where appropriate with ward councillors to look at gaps in community provision as well. I think it's important that ward councillors are aware of what work is happening in their local area and don't find out by accident what is being discussed with the community groups in their area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Muz, do you want to respond, please? Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's important to involve local councillors, and each primary care network, they've identified their gaps, and of course conversations have taken place with the council. And I will ask officers, like, how can councillors who are particularly interested can be informed and have some input into their particular areas, because councillors differ very much in how much contact they have with their own PCN in their locality.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Any supplementary? No? Right, thank you, members. Are we all okay to agree with the recommendation? Show of hands or nods? Thank you very much. We've got approval there. Okay, we've got item 16. Before we go into the report, I'm assuming that all members have read the private items under item 19, so we are able to make a decision on Kirklees Active Leisure Funding and Partnership Framework. Is that okay? Yeah. So item 16, who was moving this? Councillor Paul Davis. Yeah. Paul, up to you.
Thank you, Leader. I think people will remember, members will remember, last year Cabinet on the 28th of July went through a similar discussion around the COVID impact on Carl. And clearly at that time there was a real concern about Carl potentially being in an insolvent position. And at the time there was an underwrite of up to 4 million provided through 2020 to 21. And that clearly was provided to ensure that Carl didn't go under as such. That amount of money is expected to be fully utilised, along with an additional 1.1 million government funding, where there was a successful bid back in January of this year. However, we are still in a very difficult position. I say we, Carl is in an extremely difficult position, and clearly it's been identified there is a further need for us to underwrite, and this time of requirement up to 3.5 million. The underwrite may reduce further if there's if subsequent bidding for funds, government funds, is successful. So that's important to remember. It's up to 3.5 million. So in terms of the recommendations, my recommendations along which mirror the officers are to note this report on appendices A to I, approve the council commitment to underwrite Carl income loss as a direct consequence of COVID of up to 3.5 million through 2021-22 from earmarked council reserves, and to approve the accompanying Carl partnership framework as part of the broader inclusive ambition agenda, and note the incorporation of the underwrite up to 3.5 million into the updated general reserves position as part of the Council's 2020-21 financial outturn and rollover report, which obviously we've just discussed. And then finally, to note that as part of the forthcoming medium-term financial strategy review, officers will review the Carl partnership and framework in line with emerging priority outcomes, including consideration of attendant resourcing implications that might emerge. I would move that this be put to the members.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Davies. Councillor Muscan, are you seconding this?
Yes, I fully support the further allocation of financial support for CALS. And just to point out, like my colleague said, 4,000 was underwritten last year. This report is 3.5 not 4,000, 4 million last year, 3.5 million this year, and we only received 1.1 million from government, so that's really important to point out as well. And I welcome the Kirklees partnership framework with a focus on tackling health inequalities.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on this? No. Can I have a show of hands to move this? Thank you very much. Members, we'll move on to item 17. Consider the outcome of tenant and leaseholder consultation and proposals on the future of 4 of the council's high-rise blocks: Bishop's Court, Home Park Court, Berry Brow and Buxton House, and Harold Wilson Court, to improve fire safety. But before we move on to the report, can I just ask that we've all read the private item under item 20? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Cathy Scott, over to you. Last item on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. So this Cabinet report comes before Cabinet to consider the outcome of the tenant and leaseholder consultation and the proposals for the future of 4 of the Council's high-rise blocks. That's Bishop Court, Home Park Court at Berry Brow, and Buxton House and Harold Wilson Court to improve fire safety. The tragic events of Grenfell remind us that we can't ignore the ongoing risks associated with high-rise residential blocks, resulting in regulatory reform and ask owners of such buildings to listen to the concerns of the residents and to carry out suitable and sufficient risk assessments and act immediately to eliminate risks while continuing to involve residents in the delivery of this remediation improvement programmes and to ensure the ongoing management of the blocks in accordance with the guidance of the Building Safety Bill 2020 and the Fire Safety Act 2021. So before you today, the outcome of the consultation, there was questions asked, and this was done back in February the 16th. It was to refurbish to a high standard to ensure fire safety and measures were in place, or the demolition or new build on site. This was left for the residents of these blocks to ensure that they had a voice in what we were doing, the most crucial thing, and they fed back to us. So as a result of that consultation, Berry Brown residents assumed that they wanted to go for option 2 to demolish, and Berry Brown blocks, which are, again I'll remind you, are Bishop Court and Home Park Court. And as a result of the consultation for Buxton House, the residents went for option 1, which was to improve the block. So the residents' voice was in that. So the reason that the council have carefully considered the feedback from the residents and the leaseholder is namely because they've asked to be safe, to feel safe and live in a modern home. The 4 high-rise blocks continue to present ongoing fire risks and also take into account the deficiencies of some of the fabrics in each of these buildings. Without significant investment, we cannot provide an assurance of safety to the current and the future residents in each block. The blocks are dated, in poor thermal efficiency, design and layout lack space, the infrastructure that does not deliver a good place for making or support sustainable communities, and therefore does not offer housing to meet the modern day need and that which the council aspires to give. So the recommendations are set out. Our officer's recommendation, I will read these in full to you to ensure that you understand the undertaking. We have a duty of care of our residents to provide safety, and the cost of safety you can't measure. So, A, consider the results of the consultation and as a result decide to set out below in the rest of this officer's recommendations. Authorise the Strategic Director for Growth and Regeneration to negotiate and agree terms, including payment to Zurich and fees and costs, which with Zurich as a landlord for the surrender of the current ground floor access in terms of the new lease of the alternative ground premises, which are to be identified as of yet, and to facilitate access to the refurbished Buxton House. Authorise the Strategic Director for Growth and Regeneration to negotiate and agree terms with Zurich, and obviously the Zurich fees and costs. There will be licenses to carry out, required to carry out alterations by which Zurich, as a landlord, permits the work to be done at the Buxton House. D, to approve the option to demolish Home Park Court and Bishop Court at Berry Brow, and a new build design within the estimated total budget is an envelope of investment there of 37 million. E, to approve the option to improve and remediate Buxton House and a programme of works to ensure that the safe homes within the estimated budget envelope of 16 million. To approve a decant plan of Home Park Court and Bishop Court at Berry Brow and also at Buxton House. Authorise the Strategic Director for Growth and Regeneration to serve the tenants occupying at Home Park Court and Bishop Court at Berry Brow interim demolition notices and final demolition notices. H, agree the changes in the allocation policy explained in 2.3 and 2.4 of this report. This is giving people a greater chance to be decanted, so they'll move up to Band B. I, to note the fire safety improvement works and provisional budget of 4 million at Harold Wilson Court. J, to authorise the Strategic Director for Growth and Regeneration to carry out further works to finalise the design schemes and in consultation with the Service Director, finance and financial viability for each scheme relating to the proposed developments and or work with Home Park Court and Bishop Court, Berry Brow and also Buxton House and implement the schemes and finalise notes in paragraphs D and E. Part K, if following the financial viability appraisal in paragraph J, any one or more of these schemes that do not consider to be viable, a further report will be brought back to Cabinet for consideration. L, authorise the Service Director of Legal Governance and Commissioning to finalise and enter into all appropriate contracts, deeds and documents in relation to the appointment of the successful bidder for the delivery of the fire safety remediation at Harold Wilson Court, refurbishment and remodelling of Buxton House and the regeneration of the new build of 2 high-rise blocks in Berry Brow in consultation with the Service Director of Homes and Neighbourhood. Chair, I move this report and hope Cabinet members support this. You can't put a price on people's safety, and I think that, you know, we need to be on the front foot and get this done as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Peter McBride.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not against the recommendation at all, but I find what's happened at Harold Wilson Court an absolute disgrace. I signed off that Harold Wilson Court about 8 years ago. We were told it was state-of-the-art, regulation, absolute, etc. Each one of those units there cost £80,000+ to refurbish. There was a lot of comment at the time about was it worth it. We got a lot of money from the EU to be able to do it. But one assumed at the time that the standards would obviously be state-of-the-art. Clearly they weren't. But what it tells you is about a totally deregulated regulation system. Do you realise that our building regs have got to compete to do the work with the private sector? And the private sector can choose to have a cheaper version in another private firm rather than from the council. So the degree of we're paying a terrible price in this country for the lack of proper insurance and regulation of all of our public buildings. And it's not merely these. There's hundreds up and down the country, massive schemes, and the overall cost is into the many, many billions.
Thank you, Councillor Peter McBride. Councillor Will Simpson.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say well done and thank you to Cathy and all of her officers and everyone who's been involved in this, because I think it would have been far too easy for a large local authority like ourselves acting so quickly on something as serious as this post-Grenfell to fall into a top-down approach, saying this is what we think is best, so we're going to do it this way. But what we've done here, and what comes through quite clearly, is that the tenant's voice has been at the absolute heart of this, and I think that's really, really important. So well done, Cathy, and all of the officers involved.
Thank you, Councillor Will Simpson. Councillor Cathy Scott.
Yeah. I'd just like to come back to Councillor McBride where he mentioned Harold Wilson Court, and yes, we did heavily invest in that. Unfortunately, it took a tragedy for us to reflect and look at new materials. You know, that building standards changes from one day to another, but we can't put a price on safety, and that's what I keep saying to people. But at least here in Kirklees, we're demonstrating we care, and I can only say a great thanks to the officers involved. They've been so proactive with this, working tirelessly to ensure that this is happening. The plus is, this is a £56 million investment as well. So for me, I think this should be commended. Let's get out there and get on with it. So I hope you support this recommendation.
Councillor Eric Firth.
When I read through the papers, negotiations have started, but will they hold us to ransom? That's my only fear.
Probably need some professional advice on this, right? Yeah. Concerns about Zurich, David.
Thank you, Chair. Zurich will work with us. We've got professional officers who are able to ensure those negotiations are held on a balanced basis and that the council won't be held to ransom. I don't really want to go much further in terms of discussion on this because it's a commercial and sensitive discussion with Zurich, but rest assured, councillors, that we will ensure that the council aren't held to ransom. And there is probably a win-win in this as well, because Zurich have got an investment within the town centre that obviously Buxton House sits on top of, and ensuring that they have a longer-term return for their investment is within their interests.
Thank you. That's reassuring, David. Thank you. Just a point from my side that obviously this is going to cost a lot of money, and quite rightly so. Cathy said that You know, you can't put a price on people's lives. So it will cost whatever we're going to be doing. But remember, this is as a result of the tragedy that we had at Grenfell when people died on substandard standards. That's what this results. But luckily, because we are a local authority, we are a responsible landlord. You know, we have got the money to put this right. You know, although there'll be a lot of people that we have to decant and there'll be a lot of upheaval. You know, we have to do that. You know, because at the end of the day, it's about saving lives. But my heart goes out to those who are living in private sector high-rise properties who are paid a fortune, and you know, it's a tragedy that their life savings have been invested in the properties, the sort of properties that you're talking about, and the kind of stories you hear. You know, it's disheartening, and I think that goes back to what Peter was saying. So that's what Peter was talking about in terms of, you know, we did whatever we had to do with the right intentions. We will do whatever we need to do again to get the property safe and get the things sorted out. But it will cost money. But where lives are concerned, you know, we have to. So we all, Cathy, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, just to also mention, I should have mentioned it earlier, this is not coming out of the general fund. This is actually coming out of the HRA, and it was part of the 30-year plan. So it's just so that you are aware that, that I think the challenging times, and we've just got to ensure we're listening to our tenants. It's a two-way conversation, and we're responding.
Thank you, Cathy. So on that note, are we all okay to approve this report? Show of hands or nods? Thank you very much. You'll be really pleased to know that that is the end of the meeting. We've done really, really well. We started off a bit slow, but we still moved on as people are dropping off without mentioning any names. But whatever you do over the next few weeks, enjoy yourselves. You know, there'll be school breaks, summer holidays. And once again, thank you very much for all the hard work, cabinet members, councillors, our great officers who are here today, and officers who have actually put in a lot of effort in terms of bringing these reports to us. So thank you very much. Good night and God bless.